If you dive deep enough into the lakes of the wizarding world, you'll run into a civilization that's so old, it makes Hogwarts look like a brand new startup, the Merpeople. And we can forget the Disney image right away. These are not the kind of merfolk who sit on rocks singing about forks. Down here, things are a lot more serious. Merpeople are a bit like humans, but only a bit. Their skin is gray and scaly, their eyes are a yellowish color, and their long dark hair drifts around them in the water. Altogether, they look like something between an ancient warrior tribe and a horror movie set underwater. Many of them carry spears or tridents, basically a living "do not disturb" sign. Most of them are slightly taller than humans and usually quite strongly built. They're impressively strong, and they move through the water so fast that even a dolphin would be jealous. With their gills and fins, they can survive in freezing water without any trouble at all. Merpeople are dangerous for a reason. They defend their territory and they're easily offended. When they have to fight, they don't fight alone. They move together, like a well-trained team. But they aren't cruel. They live by their own rules and follow their own strict sense of order. Something a lot of people forget. Merpeople have their own language. Mermish. To us, it just sounds like deep, bubbling noise. But underwater, it's a full language with its own rules. Their culture is surprisingly advanced. Under the Black Lake, there's an entire town made of rock, seaweed, and coral. A place you'd never see, even if you're standing right above it on the shore. And down there, in almost total darkness, Merpeople have something that keeps surprising visitors. Their eyes. Underwater, they can catch movements, flashes of light, and tiny changes in the shadows that we would never notice. Which makes our next creature even more interesting. Kelpie. The Kelpie is one of those creatures you only misjudge once. At first glance, it just looks like a normal horse standing by the water's edge. Wet, calm, almost harmless. But that's exactly the trap. A Kelpie is a magical water creature that can change its form. Most of the time, it chooses the shape of a horse to lure people closer. And once they're close enough, it shows its true face. In its real form, a Kelpie is darker and slimier, with wet, smooth skin that looks a bit like seaweed. Its eyes seem empty and cold, and its mane hangs down in dripping strands. It's strong. A single Kelpie can flip a boat or drag someone under the surface without much effort at all. They live mainly in rivers, lakes, and marshes across Britain. The most famous one of all is the Kelpie in Loch Ness. And yes, in the Harry Potter universe, that's Nessie. No dinosaur, no giant fish. Just a Kelpie that has spent centuries scaring muggles for fun. Wizards know exactly what it is, of course, but they let it carry on. Probably because it's become a bit of a tradition by now. What makes the Kelpie truly dangerous is its shape-shifting ability. It can change its appearance so it looks like a completely normal animal, sometimes even a big dog. All of that just to tempt someone into touching it, because the moment you lay a hand on it, you stick to its skin, like you've grabbed a giant strip of glue, and then it pulls you into the water. The Kelpie doesn't have a long list of special magical powers beyond that. Its strength and its disguise are more than enough. There are spells to control it. Newt Scamander uses one on a Kelpie in Fantastic Beasts, though, to be fair, that looked more like luck than a casual everyday routine. In the films, you won't see a Kelpie in the Harry Potter series, but you do see one in Fantastic Beasts. The Crimes of Grindelwald, inside Newt's case, that green, slimy horse creature in the water. And if you're thinking, okay, if that thing is already the Loch Ness Monster, what could possibly be worse? The next creature is a good start on that answer. Grindylow. The Grindylow is one of those creatures that looks small but can cause a surprising amount of trouble. It lives in dark, cold lakes and rivers, exactly the sort of places where you really don't want something grabbing your ankle while you're swimming. At first glance, a Grindylow almost looks harmless. A thin, greenish body, a big head and legs that look more like long sticks. But the real problem is its arms. They're long and thin, ending in bony fingers that latch onto anything they can get hold of. And once a Grindylow gets a grip, it doesn't let go easily. They're not very big, about the size of a small child, but they're much faster than they look. Grindylows dart through the water with sudden changes of direction, like nervous shadows slipping past. They're not exactly friendly either. Many Grindylows are bad-tempered and attack anything that comes too close. Why? Hard to say. Maybe that's just how they are. Maybe it's just what happens when you live your whole life in cold lakes. I wouldn't be in a great mood there either. The real danger is that Grindylows rarely act alone. One Grindylow is annoying, but 5 or 10 can become a serious problem very quickly. Their long fingers, speed, and jerky movements make them hard to avoid once they're on you. They don't really produce anything special or magical. Nobody uses Grindylows for potion ingredients, and nobody raises them for anything useful. probably because no one wants to spend that much time anywhere near them. You've seen them before, of course, in Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. In the underwater task of the Triwizard Tournament, they attack Harry while he's searching for Ron. But that behavior raises a small question we still have to answer. If Grindylows are this hostile, why do some water dwellers still allow them to live so close to their children? That leads us straight into the next chapter. Hippocampus. The hippocampus is one of the most beautiful water creatures in the magical world, and at the same time, one of the strangest. It looks like someone took a horse and a huge fish and said, let's just combine them. The result is a creature with the head and front body of a horse, and the long, shimmering tail of a sea creature. The skin of a hippocampus looks smooth and shiny, almost like wet scales. Most of them are blue or silver, but there are rare greenish ones as well. They can grow quite large, bigger than a normal horse, and thanks to their powerful tails, they're incredibly fast in the water. When a hippocampus shoots forward, it looks like a sparkling arrow slicing through the depths. They're not truly dangerous, at least not compared to some other water creatures. They're shy and tend to keep away from humans, but you still shouldn't underestimate them. A kick from their front legs or one solid hit from that tail is more than enough to flip a small boat. Even if the hippocampus didn't mean any harm, their main power is speed and agility. On top of that, they're surprisingly intelligent. Newt Scamander managed it once. In his notes, he explains that a hippocampus can be calmed if you slip a strong magical rope around it. After that, you can even ride it for a short while. Whether that's actually a good idea is another question. You're basically sitting half on a horse and half on a giant slippery fish. In the films, the hippocampus never appears in the Harry Potter movies, but you can spot a young one briefly in Fantastic Beasts: The Crimes of Grindelwald inside Newt's case, where he's feeding it. What's really interesting, though, isn't the baby. It's what it will one day grow into. Adult hippocampi often share their waters with a creature that's far more unpredictable. And that's the one we're looking at next. Sea Serpent. The sea serpent is a perfect example of how the wizarding world sometimes doesn't need to invent anything new. Some muggles see something gigantic moving out at sea and start telling stories about sea monsters. Wizards just look at it and think, ah, sea serpent, another one. And that's not even a joke. These creatures have been sighted around the world for centuries. A sea serpent can grow to an enormous size. We're not talking 3 or 4 meters here. Some reports claim lengths close to that of a small train. Its body is long and covered in scales, twisting through the water like a never-ending tunnel. The head often looks a bit like a dragon's, with sharp teeth that could easily tear through the side of a wooden ship. Despite their size, sea serpents move with surprising grace. They glide through the water without sending big waves to the surface, and they disappear just as quickly as they appear. That makes them frightening, but also very hard to study. Many witches and wizards believe we've only discovered a fraction of the different types that exist. As for danger, let's just say this. If you meet one in the open ocean, it's probably not the best time to try petting it. They're unpredictable and can turn very aggressive if something comes too close. Some attack boats, while others completely ignore entire ships. It seems to depend on the individual serpent's nature and mood. Their bite is strong enough to snap through enchanted nets or thick wooden beams without much effort. People don't really harvest potion ingredients from sea serpents, mostly because very few are brave or foolish enough to get that close. Most wizards are perfectly happy to admire them from a very safe distance. Muggles, on the other hand, often explain those same sightings away as strange waves or old sailor stories. You never see a real sea serpent in the Harry Potter films, but they do appear in the extended Fantastic Beasts lore and in Newt Scamander's writings. Still, they're worth talking about, because their habitat overlaps with another creature that has a special reputation. Wherever this next water creature shows up, something strange never seems far behind. Shrake. The Shrake is a water creature you don't hear much about, and that's not because it's boring. A Shrake is a fish-like creature covered head to tail in sharp, hard spines. Its body looks like someone took an ordinary fish and pushed it straight through a cactus. Every movement makes the spines tremble slightly, and just one look at it is enough for any fisherman to think, yeah, I'm not touching that. Those spines aren't just for show. They make the Shrake almost impossible to catch. No net holds it, no hook keeps it, no rope survives it. Anyone who tries to catch one will end up with destroyed gear at best, or a boat full of holes at worst. That constant destruction has given the Shrake a reputation as a sort of revenge spirit of the sea. The story goes back to older times. Muggle fishermen once tried regularly to catch strange sea creatures, and sometimes even merpeople. Supposedly, this angered the wizarding world so much that a group of witches and wizards either created the Shrake or released it into the wild to teach the muggles a lesson. Since then, Shrakes have been shredding nets along certain coasts as if it were a favorite hobby. Whether the story is true or not is hard to say, but merpeople certainly don't seem to mind Shrakes. Or at least, they leave them alone. Their behavior is pretty simple. Shrakes don't warn you, they just slice through whatever gets in their way, then vanish back into deeper water. A quiet creature, but a very dangerous one. In terms of size, Shrakes don't grow gigantic, but they can easily reach a meter or more. Their bodies are muscular and they're surprisingly fast, despite all those spines. As far as anyone knows, there are no famous potions or magical items made from Shrakes. Shrakes never appear in the Harry Potter films, but they're part of the Fantastic Beasts canon, especially in Newt Scamander's descriptions of coastal magical life. What makes them really interesting is where they live. Shrakes often swim in places where several different species cross paths, and in exactly those waters you'll often find a creature that's much smaller, but with one of the most dangerous abilities you can have underwater. Lobalug. The Lobalug is one of those underwater creatures that are easy to underestimate the first time you see them. It's small, not very impressive to look at, and it mostly resembles a mix between a sea cucumber and a bundle of tentacles. But that's exactly why it's so dangerous. The Lobalug has an ability that even large sea creatures take very seriously. Its body has two parts, a long black tube buried in the sand or mud, and a thick bubble-like sac sticking out at one end. It looks harmless until you find out what's inside. That sac is filled with highly toxic fluid, which the Lobalug can shoot like a tiny water cannon. It's surprisingly accurate, and the jet can leave other creatures stunned or completely unable to move. We're not talking about a giant monster here. A Lobalug only reaches about 30 to 40 centimeters in length, and once it buries itself, you can barely tell there's anything alive there at all. But that's its strength. It just waits, and only strikes when something comes too close. For merpeople, the Lobalug is an important part of everyday life. They use its venom for different purposes, sometimes to hunt, sometimes as a form of defense. And yes, there are wizards who use Lobalug venom in certain potions very carefully because the dose matters a lot. Lobalugs aren't usually aggressive towards humans. They only attack if they feel threatened or if someone steps directly on them. Still, in any waters where merpeople live, it's a good idea to watch where you put your feet. One wrong step, and you'll learn a very quick and very painful lesson about underwater biology. They never appear in the Harry Potter films. They come mainly from the Fantastic Beasts canon, where Newt explains how merpeople use their venom and why this little creature is so important to underwater life. Wherever Lobalugs live, you'll often find another creature that's the complete opposite, loud, chaotic, and almost impossible to overlook. Plimpy. If the Lobalug is the quiet, dangerous background creature of the underwater world, then the Plimpy is the total opposite. A Plimpy is loud, obvious, and so curious that it sometimes feels like its only goal is to cause trouble, or at least a bit of chaos. Plimpies look like round, frog-like creatures with long, spindly legs that seem way too big for their bodies. Their feet have little fins, and on the back of their heads they've got a kind of spiral tail fin that wobbles around wildly every time they move. Altogether, they look a bit like an overexcited pond frog trying to prove it belongs in open water. They don't grow very large, maybe about the size of a handball, but their energy more than makes up for the size Plimpies are always moving. For merpeople, they're more of a nuisance than a true threat. Many merpeople actually put up special nets just to keep Plimpies out, because otherwise they'd be everywhere. Plimpies aren't really dangerous, but they can be very annoying. They sometimes bite anything they find interesting. Clothes, nets, shoes, even wands if you're unlucky. Their bite isn't terribly strong, but it's annoying enough to make someone lose their balance or panic for a second. Magically, Plimpies aren't the most useful creatures. The only real use we know, some wizards dry Plimpy legs as ingredients for certain potions. Mostly, Plimpies are just part of the smaller lakes and ponds. You never see a Plimpy in the Harry Potter films or in the Fantastic Beasts movies. Everything we know about them comes from Newt Scamander's Fantastic Beasts and a few extra Wizarding World sources. Still, they're worth knowing. Plimpies often share their waters with a creature that has a very special connection to the Wizarding World. Murtlap. The Murtlap is a water creature that's very easy to underestimate. It basically looks like a large, hairless rat with a strange growth on its back that resembles a small sea anemone. And that back is what makes the Murtlap one of the most useful and surprisingly dangerous creatures along the coast. Mertlaps live mostly around the British coastline, in shallow waters and between rocks, where they feed on small crustaceans and anything else that wanders too close. When a mertlap feels threatened, it bites, and that bite hurts. A lot. The area swells up instantly, and some people even suffer temporary paralysis or dizziness from it. The most important part of its body is that anemone-like growth on its back. It looks harmless, but it's used to make one of the best-known magical remedies, Mertlap Essence. Every Hogwarts student has heard of it by their first year, because it soothes the skin and prevents infections. Madame Pomfrey seems to put it on almost every type of minor injury. Mertlaps themselves aren't very big. Most would fit easily into 2 hands. They're light and surprisingly fast, especially in shallow water. But they're not exactly hunters. They prefer to hide, burrow down, or slip between rocks until things calm down again. They're not dangerous in the classic sense. It's more their bite and the reactions to it that give them their reputation as unpleasant neighbors. Still, wizards respect them, not for their strength, but for how useful they are. Without mertlaps, the Hogwarts Hospital Wing would probably be a much more stressful place. You can see a mertlap in Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them when one of them bites Newt inside his case, a perfect little moment that shows how quick and moody they can be. What makes them especially interesting is where some of them live. Most stay near the coasts, but a few types move further north into deeper, darker, and much more unpredictable waters. And there they share their home with one of the most famous creatures in the entire Wizarding World's oceans, giant squid. The giant squid is probably the most famous water creature in all of Hogwarts, and at the same time, the least dangerous. Which is pretty funny when you think about the fact that this animal is so big, it could easily hold an entire boat in its tentacles. And yet, the giant squid is basically just living its best, relaxed life. It lives in the Black Lake, right next to the Merpeople's town. With its huge long arms, it drifts slowly through the water. Sometimes it surfaces, sometimes it just lets 1 or 2 tentacles break through the surface as if it's enjoying a bit of sunlight. The students know it well, some even say it playfully taps their food away if they sit too close to the water in summer. Its body is impressive, a massive torpedo-shaped shape, round and smooth with long, powerful tentacles. Nobody knows exactly how big it really is. Most guesses range somewhere between 20 and 30 meters in length. And that's just a guess. If it wanted to, it could probably take up half the lake. Despite all that, it's not dangerous. The giant squid is seen as gentle and curious. There isn't a single known story of it ever attacking anyone. Even Hagrid, who loves pretty much anything big and strange, calls it soft-hearted. And if Hagrid calls something soft-hearted, you can usually trust that. Magically speaking, the giant squid doesn't have any special powers. No venom, no invisibility, no spell-casting tentacles. Nobody uses it for potion ingredients, and no one even considers hunting it. On screen, the giant squid is only seen very briefly. For example, at the beginning of The Prisoner of Azkaban, when Harry and the others are at the lake. What's really interesting, though, isn't just its size. It's the fact that it lives in the Black Lake at all, a place where several very different species share the same water. And down there, in the dark, the giant squid shares its home with a creature that's much smaller, but carries a very dark history with it. Kappa. The kappa is the kind of creature you'd rather watch from a safe distance. It lives in shallow waters, swamps, slow rivers, ponds, especially in Japan. At first glance, it looks like a mix between a monkey and a frog. Thin arms, long fingers, greenish skin, and a face that pretty much always looks annoyed with the entire world. A kappa's body is small and light, roughly the size of a child. Its hands are webbed and its back is covered in tough scales. The strangest part, though, is its head. On top of the skull is a small, bowl-shaped depression that is always filled with water, and that water is the source of its strength. As long as the bowl stays full, the kappa has unnatural strength and can move with incredible speed. The kappa is dangerous mainly because of its personality. It's not only strong, but also moody, and it can attack people if it feels threatened, or simply if it's in a bad mood. There are old stories about kappas trying to drag humans into rivers. Whether those tales are exaggerated or not, one thing's clear. This is not a creature you want to take lightly. Luckily, there's a trick. Kappas are extremely polite, so polite that you can actually use it against them. If you bow to a kappa, it will bow back automatically. When it does, the water from its head bowl spills onto the ground, and the kappa is suddenly weak. Kappas aren't used as often in magic as you might think, but their blood is said to have special properties. In some regions, it's used in potions meant to boost healing or strength. You won't find a kappa in any of the Harry Potter films, but it does appear in Newt Scamander's Fantastic Beasts, where its behavior and its weakness are explained in more detail. This mix of strength, danger, and weird politeness makes the kappa pretty unique. But compared to the last water creature on our list, the kappa almost feels like a mild little river spirit. Dugbog. The dugbog is a creature that's very easy to miss, which is ironic because that's its greatest strength. It lives in bogs, marshes, and shallow, muddy waters, places where the water is dark and the ground is soft and treacherous. There, a dugbog will lie perfectly still for hours, looking exactly like an ordinary gray-green log. Only if you look very closely will you notice the small eyes and the narrow, hard-toothed mouth. A dugbog isn't very big. It can grow to about the length of a medium-sized dog, but it's much flatter. Its body is broad, slimy, and extremely hard to spot when it's half buried in the muck. If you step into a bog and think you've just hit a piece of wood, you might only realize too late that it's something alive. Its main weapon is its powerful jaw. Dugbogs snap shut in an instant, especially when someone steps on them or walks right past. For muggles or animals, the bite can cause serious injuries. In some areas, children were once warned about biting logs long before they ever heard the word dugbog. Dugbogs love biting unicorns' legs. Why unicorns of all creatures? Nobody really knows. Maybe the ground around them just tastes better. But those attacks make dugbogs serious pests in some forests. Magically speaking, they're not very useful. There are no major potions based on dugbog parts, and most witches and wizards avoid them completely. They're not smart, not cooperative, and not tameable. Basically, just aggressive bog traps with teeth. You never see a dugbog in the Harry Potter films, but it's part of Newt Scamander's Fantastic Beasts canon, where it's described as a particularly dangerous swamp and marsh dweller. And that makes it a fitting end to our journey through the magical underwater world. The dugbog shows that some of the most dangerous beings are right under our feet, completely invisible until it's already too late. And with that, we're back at the surface again. When you look at all these water creatures together, one thing becomes pretty clear. The wizarding world is way bigger than what we ever get to see in the films. Some of these beings lurk in deep shadows, others swim right under Hogwarts as if they're part of everyday school life. Which of these creatures would you absolutely not want to run into in the water? And which one would you secretly love to observe from a safe distance? Tell me in the comments. I want to see which side wins. Team screaming and swimming away, or Team I'd risk it, maybe. And if you feel like diving even deeper into this world, you'll want to stick around, because in the next video, we're leaving the water behind and heading somewhere a lot more dangerous. Maybe you already have a guess, maybe not. But let's just say this. If you thought an angry Kelpie was bad, wait until you meet the most poisonous creatures in the entire wizarding world. So if you don't want to miss that, make sure to follow the channel. Not because YouTubers always say that, but because we're going to pick apart every corner of the magical world here, and you definitely don't want to find out about some of these beings for the first time from a hospital bed in the Hogwarts infirmary. See you in the next adventure.